What is going on? It's Halsey with the Helicopter Podcast, and I am just super excited to be doing what I'm doing. I love doing the podcast, and I love connecting with my network of friends, new friends, and then kind of the middle area. And I think today's guest is kind of that middle area because I feel like I've known this guy for a long time. I don't know why, but I just feel like I recognize his face. I hear his name. He's obviously connected with Hillsboro Heli Academy, which is where I went. So I think there's some of that. And then I finally got to meet him last year in Madrid at European Rotors. And we've been staying in touch. So I'm super excited to have Phil on the podcast today. Before we talk with Phil, of course, big thanks to MHM Publishing and the Vertical HeliCASTS platform for creating such an amazing helicopter podcasting platform. And a big shout out to all of our sponsors. Please, if you're listening, keep listening because that allows for the sponsorship. And that's awesome because then it allows me to keep going and creating this content, which I love doing. And I hope that you're finding a lot of use out of it. I think today's episode is going to be awesome for everyone. But if you are from Europe and you're thinking about training and you don't even know where to start, then this is definitely an episode that you're going to want to listen to because Phil has his doctorate in what it's like to go from Europe to the States to train. And he's actually helped over, I think, 150 German students specifically do the same thing as he's done. So Phil, welcome to the Helicopter Podcast. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm great. Thanks.
And it's Phil, is it Haupt? I always mess. It's very hard for me to say.
Yeah, try my second name. It's Marek. It's even harder. But it's Haupt.
Haupt. Phil Haupt. Yeah. Okay, I can do that. Phil Haupt. I like this. I feel like I'm fairly okay at podcasting. I mean, by this episode will be, in the 90s. So I've had a lot of practice, but I still have like this anxiety about saying names wrong. I don't like when people say my name wrong. And then I always feel really bad when I mess it up on someone else's name. So anyway, Phil, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on. We connected last year for the first time, right? When we were both in Spain for European Rotors.
Yeah, that was the first time we actually met, but I think we both knew of each other and heard about each other. And I mean, obviously watched and listened to your podcast quite a bit. So it kind of feels to me like I know you quite well. So I have an advantage here.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. And in fact, you and I kind of had some similar steps, at Hillsboro and similar positions. We figured out when we talked the other day that we didn't quite cross paths. So you started in 2014. I left Hillsboro in 2014. I left in April, and I think that you said that you started August, September timeframe.
Yeah.
Looking at my notes here, it sounds like you kind of fell in love with helicopters while doing a tour in South Africa as a youngster. And then that flame just kind of kept burning until you were, old enough and had some money to actually consider training. So Let's fast forward to that point and talk me through this idea of why come all the way to the United States to train when you're in Europe and now you're actually working in Europe. So what is the purpose and the point of doing it that way?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, and it's pretty much the same right now, is that it's very hard to find like a job when you're just starting out in the industry in Europe. And they don't really have these low hour pilot jobs like CFI or like R44 tour jobs in Europe, really. So it's very hard to find a way into the industry. And another big thing is also like cost. So it's about like 30 to 50% more expensive to do it in Europe. Which is kind of crazy. And like looking into it, Europe wasn't really on my radar at all. like I told you the other day, my first flight was actually in New Zealand, where I flew in R-22, and that would have been my first pick because I love New Zealand. It's a beautiful country. Unfortunately, they don't have a good visa to stick around, so you could have done your training there, but just had to leave afterwards. In the States, there's a couple of schools that have that F1 visa, and originally I found another school. They don't exist anymore. They're called Hillsboro Academy. They had this F1 visa in combination with the European licensing. So you got your American license plus your European license, and then you could work for a year. And that kind of like drew me to that school back in the day. I didn't actually know anything about Hillsboro at the time, so that was kind of not on my radar at all, unfortunately. But later on, after I finished my European training with Hillsboro Academy, a friend from the Netherlands told me about Hillsboro and the fact that you could actually work for 2 years after finishing your training. And I think about 5 weeks or 6 weeks later, I stepped off the plane in Portland, and best decision ever. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very familiar with Bristow. Like you said, I don't think they're around anymore. I didn't realize that they had like the European conversion set in, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And obviously, we'll talk about how you kind of instrumented the same with Hillsboro during your time there. I've always thought of like one of the hard things of flight school, if you're European and you're coming to the United States, is kind of like this idea of just being very far away from home. I'm a home guy. I like home. I actually moved away from my home for 10 years, different state, and I really grew up a lot. So I think it was really important. But leaving actually was very uncomfortable for me. Gave me anxiety. Took me away from my parents and my comfort zone. We're a very tight knit family. Was it hard for you to come to the United States? Do you remember, like, stepping foot in Portland for the first time and kind of what that felt like? Was it, a lot of nerves, or was it, more excitement?
I think for me, it was more excitement at the time. I lived abroad before. I lived in New Zealand and in France for a while. And then, like I said, in Florida for a year. And then I came to Portland. And for me, it was like something like almost like coming home to Oregon. Was like the landscape, the people. I think it's very European compared to some other states. So it's pretty easy to set foot there. And I think within the first week, we had like a going away party at Edgefield with a bunch of pilots around. And it was really like, it was a tight-knit community back then already. And yeah, you felt like part of the family right away. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, certainly a lot of good times had at the local watering holes around both the Troutdale campus and for me, really the Hillsboro campus, and honestly, the tight-knit community and the networking, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Quick quiz question for you. Do you know what street the Edgefield is located off?
Is it Halsey?
It's Halsey. So if you've never been to Portland, if you're listening to the podcast, you've never been to Portland, Oregon, there's a big street, and it's called Halsey Street. Obviously named after me, because I'm a podcast. No, I'm kidding. It's nothing to do with me. I don't even think my parents knew about it when they named me. But it is kind of funny. For Halloween one year, actually, Phil, I was I painted my face and I put yellow stripes down my face, and I had a Halsey Street sign actually that I may have procured somehow in high school, and so I was Halsey Street for Halloween, which I thought was pretty funny. But I love the Edgefield. McMiniman's kind of a super cool vibe. And I think that's one of the cool things about going to a big school like Hillsboro is you have such a large community of people that are going there and learning and kind of in that same state that you're in. And for Europeans, especially, there's a lot of European students. So you guys kind of already have that going for you, and you're able to build that camaraderie and have that companionship right away. I'm sure that makes things easier. Not to mention, learning how to fly in the Pacific Northwest is probably bar none one of the best places. One thing that I've always thought, I know that you fly in Germany now. When you're flying in Germany, are you speaking English or German?
Both. So it's actually when we fly to Berlin or Hamburg, for example, or we talk with like approach controls. then we speak in English because it's international airport. And then at the small fields here, they have this weird thing where it's like, it's a tower, but it's not a tower. So you have somebody there talking to you on the radio, but they're not allowed to give you any clearances, which I think is a very odd system. So they don't actually have any untowered airports. With those guys, you speak usually in German.
Interesting. So obviously English being kind of the international, or not kind of, is the international language for aviation. Yeah. Obviously you spent time in New Zealand. So your English now seems actually very, very good. But, I know that maybe some of my European listeners might be listening to this right now, even having a little bit of a hard time understanding, us talking, just because we talk fast. And maybe they have some trepidation about coming to a school in the States just because of the language barrier. I know in Europe, it's probably not that big of a thing, because I think, going to school with a lot of Europeans, I learned that you guys were really into American pop culture and watching American movies and things like that growing up. So I think you kind of just learn English. But I'm sure that there's some people out there that are kind of worried just because of their accent or not fully understanding English. What would you tell those students about kind of calming some of their anxieties of coming over and learning in the United States?
Yeah, I mean that's a common thing, and some students who learn like very basic English only at school, they struggle a little bit at the beginning. Obviously, it helps a lot to prepare yourself, like watching American movies or English movies with English subtitles, reading English books, like doing some reading up on the study material for the private license, for example, helps a lot. Just getting into the rhythm and kind of like getting used to the language. And once you arrive in the States, just immerse yourself in the culture. Don't, like, even if you live with other people from your country, speak English at home, go out, meet people, interact. And usually, like, we had a couple of pretty weak students on the English side, and they all came around and, learned it pretty quickly.
Yep.
Because they immerse themselves. So that's super important.
Practice makes perfect, as they say, right? So just one of those things that if you're going to learn in the States, obviously, it's maybe even a benefit, just because English, of course, is first language over here. And if you're going to be flying all over the world, you're still going to have to be speaking in English and understanding English. And so kind of just makes sense to maybe learn the language. I know that you actually ended up marrying an American. So does she speak any German, or are you guys strictly an English speaking household?
No, she's actually learning German right now. It's a struggle. It's not an easy language, especially the umlaut and everything, and the logic of the language is a challenge. So I think learning English is much easier than learning German.
Ich bin Halsey. Right? Did I say that right?
Pretty close.
Sprechen ein bisschen Deutsch. Yeah. I can do, oh, der liebe Augustin, oh, der liebe Augustin. That's all I know. I took 2 years of German in high school, and that's what I have. It's actually funny helicopter story about that is I don't think you probably didn't know a guy named Brian Bruner back in the day at Hillsboro. He was probably before you. He was like he became a CFI like halfway through my training, and then by the time I became a CFI, he was kind of like a high time CFI, and then so he would have left before you, but he was like, when I think of my time at Hillsboro and I think of like the OG, the original gangster instructors, I think of him. And he, I knew him for, 2 years or so. And like I said, I took German in high school, and my teacher was Frau Aw. And she was awesome. One of my favorite teachers. She put up with me. I was very difficult as a student, kind of a class clown, very loud, obnoxious. Anyway, long story short, my mom ended up doing a loan. She finances houses. She's a lender for Frau Aw's daughter. And it turned out that Frau Aw's nephew is this Brian Bruner guy, this guy that I've been going to flight school with for, over 2 years and knew really well. And so kind of a small world connection.
Small world, all right.
My non-helicopter world intermixing with my helicopter world. I thought that was kind of funny. So you come to the United States. I do know that when I was going through school, obviously a lot of Europeans, I always joked that being the American at Hillsboro was like the minority. I was outnumbered, and it kind of shifted. Sometimes it would be like mostly Germans, for by and large, a ton of Norwegians during my time. I remember, I think it's like May 15th or something, which is like Norwegian Day. I mean, it was like a big celebration at Hillsboro because it was all Norwegians. And I know everyone was really fast to train. Was it the visa, or is it the visa requirement that essentially you get like 2 years? You can do 1 year of training and then you can work for 1 year. And so everyone was trying to get it done in a year. Or am I wrong on that?
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical HeliCASTS and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
I think there was the old visa, the J1 visa that we used to have.
Oh yeah, the J1.
Yeah. So that switched around. Like before I started, they started with this F1 visa, which very few schools have, and there it's actually that you have, I think it's like about a year and a half or so for the training, and then you have, regardless of how long the training took, you have 23 and a half months to work. So that's pretty cool. That you almost have 2 years to work, and then
well,
if you could, you can fly. Like we had a graduate who flew, I think, almost 2,000 hours doing his work year, and that's insane.
Yeah, that's crazy. So how long did it take you to go from zero to CFI?
That was a little bit harder because I did the European program in Florida and got my FAA commercial with them, and then switched to Hillsboro to do the FAA IFR, CFR, and CFW. I think it took me almost 2 years to finish everything, and wasted a lot of time by not having good information and not really planning ahead well enough. And the move took a couple of weeks as well. I mean, after it worked all out, but it kind of wasted some time and some money there by not knowing a good path for me.
Sure. So you, at Bristow, though, you did secure your EASA license there?
Yeah, that was back in the day when it was still UK CAA. So yeah, the British EASA license. And then I was lucky enough just before Brexit to convert it to a full EASA license, because Brexit messed this all up for a while there, and I'm not sure if it's fixed now, but it was very hard for pilots who had a UK license to get a European EASA license. So I was very fortunate that I managed to get the license converted in time to a full EASA license.
Yeah, that's really lucky. You mentioned some mistakes, some things that maybe cost you some time and money. Speaking to my audience here that might be, in a similar position to you, what were some of those mistakes, and what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
I think like how important it is to prepare well for flights in theory. I think that was like a weak point of myself, that I kind of waited until the flight lesson happened to figure out what we're going to do. And the other thing, like back in the day, I did my commercial under Part 61. And I trusted my instructor that he knows exactly what I need to do. And I ended up doing a bunch of solo flights that were supposed to be dual flights. So all those cross countries, night cross countries, I did them all solo, and then figured out, you have to do them dual. So I spent another, I think, 4.5 hours or so flying dual for flights that I already done. That was extremely frustrating because it was a lot of money. And then, I mean, in a way, like, it worked out for me in the end to switch schools, but it's not great to switch a school halfway through your training, because it's very different mindset, and you like flying in Florida where you have lots of humidity, high temperatures, but you have no way to do a pinnacle approach, for example. I mean, I didn't even know how to do that.
Sure.
And then ending up flying in the Cascades and having to land on top of a hill on my state check, and I was like, I don't know how to do this, right? So I think it's beneficial to learn to fly in an environment that you want to fly in later. I think that'd be a big point. Like if you want to fly in Europe, find a school that has similar landscapes as Europe. Florida might not be exactly like Europe. But yeah, that'd be, I think, big things for me.
Yeah, no, it's all good points. We've talked about this on the show before, where you want to advocate for yourself during your training. And especially if you're doing Part 61 training, you really need to make sure that you understand the requirements for Part 61, because no one's going to protect your wallet or your time better than you. And so you need to kind of trust your CFI or the school, but you also need to make sure that you're not just blindly leading, or going down a path where maybe there's misinterpretation. It's actually a reason why I'm a proponent of structured 141 programs. I like the idea where an instructor has to follow a syllabus and they can't move on to a next ground lesson or flight lesson without first getting through the lesson before. And if you do skip ahead, there's deviation steps and things that you need to do in order to do that. And to me, that just makes training structured. I think humans, for the most part, learn better in structured environments. I know I personally do. So, I'm always a proponent of 141. Sometimes, though, if you're doing a conversion, like from fixed wing to helicopter or whatever it may be, then 61 might be the route. And there's also some schools that have 61 programs that I'm sure are very reputable and good. But my personal experience leads me to really kind of appreciate the 141 aspect. So back in your time,
I think it takes away the work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, takes away the guesswork for sure. So you finish your school at Hillsboro, you get your CFI. Was it competitive at that time to get a job as a flight instructor, or was it kind of how it currently is? I was just there, and like they kind of really need instructors now. For me, back in the day, it was like 30 of us would interview for 2 spots. So it was very hard to get, very competitive. Was that the scenario for you as well?
Yeah, I think we had 12 candidates, and there were 3 jobs or 4 jobs in the end. At Hillsboro, and I actually already planned like a long road trip down the West Coast to kind of check out different schools and kind of hand in my resume, because I think that makes a lot of sense when you're looking for a job. Don't only just file your application online, go to the schools, meet the chief pilot or try to meet the chief pilot, right? Because they're going to get so many resumes, especially back in the day, that I was ready for that. And then, like the day after, or the day that they were going to call us, a friend of mine who also applied, and we went on a hike to just like stay focused or stay away from the school. On the drive back, he got a call from Dan Duckworth, the chief at the time. He got the job, and then we kept driving, and I was looking at my phone, waiting for the call. Nothing happened. I think 3 hours later, I texted Dan. I was like, "Hey, Dan, what's the word?" And then he called me back, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm at a family gathering. I forgot to call you." And then he offered me the job.
That's horrible.
I think I aged and lost a bunch of hair that day.
For me, it was a day that I wouldn't forget. I've talked about it in depth, but I just was kind of I did good things. I worked hard as a line service person there at Hillsboro. But I was just young, 18, 19 years old. And so going into my interviews, I was very confident, but I knew it was an uphill battle. I knew nothing was guaranteed. And the idea for me of like, because I grew up, 30 minutes from Hillsboro. I lived in Lake Oswego. My parents were there. My brother was there. Like, I just love this idea of being there. So like there was a lot of pressure, and I don't remember exactly how many, but it was like, at least 15 people interviewing, for just a couple spots. Very competitive. And at that time, we didn't do an interview flight. It was you interview with the school director, the chief instructor, and the admissions director. So Wayne Moore at that time, Jared Friend, who of course now is the head of the Heli Academy helicopter side, and then Ryan McCartney was the school director at that time, and did all the interviews. And I think I had to wait a couple days, and that was like just horrible. And then I got the call. And that was a very exciting moment, and kind of the beginning of my career.
Yeah.
And just, the excitement of getting that. It's kind of funny that Dan made you wait. What was the interview process like for you?
It was fairly similar. We did interviews with Dan as a chief, and then the assistant chiefs, and the charter general manager at the time, Mark. And after the interview, you had to like teach a lesson, and then they asked you a bunch of questions, and then afterwards we got invited to flights as well. And so we had to do interview flights at the time, and then we just had to wait a couple of days. And now knowing from the other side of the interview process, it's sometimes it's not that easy to make the call if you should hire somebody, if you should give them a chance, or if they're just a no-go. But it's like you said, it's a start of the career for most of us as a CFI, and it's a huge deal. While you as an assistant chief or chief or so always want to make sure that you hire the best instructors for your students, right? So it's not always just about the applicant, but it's also about your customers and students. And I think that's been always pretty hard, I think, on the assistant chief side.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I go back to my hiring of like when I was tasked with hiring, I tried to be unbiased going into things, but I honestly really, had an opportunity to meet most of these individuals, for, a year or two as they're training. And I really got a sense of like them as a person. To me, I assumed if they could pass their check rides, then they can do the required flying. For me, it was important that, were these people that I want to manage? Were they people I want to work with? And so I always kind of had like a decent idea of like, okay, this person's been, really a pain in the butt during training, or this person's been great. Then I did most of the CFI stage check. So I got an opportunity to, do the stage check with these guys and gals. And, it was, that is a hard position because especially like when Marcus Gruke and I actually implemented the interview flight.
Oh.
And to me, the interview flight is funny because it's a very stressful flight, and 200-hour pilots, even though they're instructors, they're not really that good. Just that's the truth, right? My 141 checkout with Jarrett Friend was horrible. I'm surprised he let me keep my job. But at that time, what he knew, what I later learned, was that a 200...
Sorry, I got a call.
All right, so this is kind of unique. Phil, who we were just talking to, you might have heard some buzzing in the background. He's flying air medical in Germany. And we actually tried to record the podcast when he was off shift, but his internet at home was not great. So we opted to do it when he was at base, but we kind of knew that he might, risk the idea of getting an emergency call. And he did. So we've paused our conversation. Him and I are going to pick back up. You may see that the audio sounds a little bit different on the second half, or him or I might be wearing different clothes because we're going to have to record it on a secondary time. But that's just part of it. He's flying air medical and his thing in Germany. So super cool. So far, the conversation's really fun. So I'm excited to get back with Phil, and we'll go from there.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
All right, 24 hours later, and we're back. And as you heard just now, Phil actually took an air medical flight while we were recording yesterday. And so we're just kind of picking up. He's great at continuity. He looks the same. Green shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, well-groomed. I rolled out of bed. It's Sunday here for me. And for him, actually. It's Sunday everywhere.
Yeah.
And I didn't shave. And I had a new shirt on. But it's a helicopter shirt. It's an old air evac shirt. So what can you do? Before the interruption, Phil, we were just kind of talking about the interview flight. And, when Marcus and I established that, that was a very hard, it's just a hard flight, and I think that when you're 1,000-hour plus CFI and you're hiring, you have to kind of, be flexible and know that, hey, it's a 200-hour pilot. You have to know it's not going to be great, but you have to look for certain things. And for me, it was kind of this control of the cockpit. Did they have a situational awareness that made me feel comfortable? Because to me, that's the most important part. So anyway, we'll finish up on that. I am, fascinated as we get to the second half of the show here to talk about, what you've done after being a CFI. I didn't realize this, but on the note that you sent me, it sounds like you did some firefighting. So talk to me a little bit about like how long you CFI'd and then getting into firefighting. And then, of course, we could talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, I think been a CFI and assistant chief and got program manager for several different things for the years. And one of our former safety managers, I'm not sure if you know him, Mark Stark. He was a pilot with HTS out of Aurora, flying the Sky Cranes. And he called me every year asking for pilots who like CFIs who want to move on. And one time my roommate actually got a job with him and flying as a SIC in the Sky Crane. And after the first day of the job, he told me about it. And I was like, hey, I could do that part-time while I still work at Hillsboro. So kind of did that in the season of 2022. Got like a crash course in flying Sky Cranes and firefighting operations, and then went out and spent the first 7 days doing nothing, like just waiting around for fires to happen. And on the 7th day, then we finally had a small fire, which was exciting because, I mean, that's a giant machine, right? It's, 22 tons or so empty weight and 40, gosh, now I have to lie, I think it's 45,000 pounds fully weight. So it's a monster. It's really cool. So I got to do that for about 4 months. I think we dropped, about 2 million liters of water. What is it, like 500,000 gallons or so?
Wow.
On fires all over the Northwest. So I was lucky that my crane was based in Eastern Oregon and Idaho, and then later on in Southern Oregon for some fires. But that was really a lot of fun. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. You guys would be busy right now. Man, the whole state of Oregon and, well, really the whole West Coast is on fire. In fact, kind of annoying, we've been kind of smoked in recently here in Redmond, which is never fun. What is your primary responsibility as an SIC on a Sky Crane?
That really depends on the captain. I think I was lucky enough that my captain really tried to include me in the teamwork. So you have a lot of checklists, obviously, that you have to read through, and do communications, your right frequencies, and like all types of information on the windshield, actually, with a marker, so the captain can see it as well. And then most of the times you fly the ferries in between the fire and the base, and sometimes, like after they drop the water, you get to fly back to the dipping site. I got very lucky that my captain was a training captain as well, so I got to try out a little bit of sucking the water into the helicopter, and then once or twice actually got to, like with his guidance, got to drop some water on the fires as well, which was much harder than you think. It looks very easy when you're sitting next to them, but timing it right, that you don't spray the water half a mile after the fire or something, it's not that easy. Yeah,
that's crazy. And what precluded you from continuing on that path?
At that time, I was actually already kind of committed to starting this job in Germany. So it's a long process to get into EMS in Germany. And I think since 2021 or so, I was kind of on the list to get started here in Germany. And the firefighting was just like a little adventure in between. But the main goal was to go back here and fly EMS in Germany.
Awesome. So the goal is always to get back to Germany. Obviously,
not always.
Your motherland there. What was that?
It wasn't always the goal, but it's a very cool opportunity to fly EMS in Germany, and that's why I really wanted to take that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess lay the land a little bit for us. Where are you located in Germany now then?
Yeah, it's the base that I'm flying at is kind of halfway in between Hamburg and Berlin in northern Germany. It's like a small village. We're pretty much just based next to a hospital. So yeah, sometimes we fly patients from here to other hospitals. Sometimes we bring patients back here. But a lot of times we also fly to like larger hospitals in Hamburg, Berlin, or like, the bigger cities around where they have a little bit more facilities for like serious cases.
Yeah, makes sense. So, right now in the United States, it's my understanding that if you meet the requirements for air medical and you have a pulse, then most likely you can get a job flying air medical. I think it's because, well, a lot of reasons, pilot shortage, one of them. The airlines have been incentivizing helicopter pilots to go over and fly airlines and fly airplanes. And I think that drew a lot of people from air medical. I think a lot of people just don't also like the schedule, kind of like myself.
Mhm.
You go, you do 2 years of US based air medical where it's 7 on, 7 off, and every other 7 is nights. That was a real drag for me on the nighttime thing. But you just mentioned that in Germany, it's quite difficult to get a job flying air medical.
Yeah.
Why is that, and what is the process?
I'd say it's one of the big things in Europe in general. There's not that many helicopter operators. EMS in Germany is by far the largest. I think there's probably around like 400 pilots in Germany in total for EMS. And I think Air Methods probably has twice as much in the States. So it's just not as big of a market in general, and they're very picky with regards to the pilots that they hire. So the company that I'm working for, they have this called a DLR test, which is, so DLR is kind of like, I think it's kind of like NASA in the States. And they kind of made this test for some of the major airlines as well that applicants have to go through. And we had to go through the same test. And in the past, I think about 50% of the applicants failed those tests for the EMS company that I work for. So I guess I was lucky.
Yeah, better be good than lucky sometimes, or better be lucky than good.
Yeah.
What's that test all about? It sounds scary and intimidating.
A lot of memory stuff. So you have to for example, you're listening to numbers, and at some point it just randomly stops, and you have to go back from that point to remember as many numbers backwards as you just heard as possible. Some memory questions with regards to like symbols and math, mental math, English. That at least wasn't too hard for me. And there's this weird thing where you have to imagine a dice in your head, and then there's like an X on top, and they tell you how they spin it, and then you have to, after, I don't know, like 20 so spins, you have to say where the X would be. So it's like, imagination for like 3D models or whatever. It's tough. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we started at 8 in the morning and ended up 6 p.m. And I got into the car that I drove there, and I think it took me half a minute to figure out how to start the car because I was just mush in my brain.
That's crazy. I feel like I would definitely fail a test like that. I'm not like a great test taker. I have like a photographic memory, so that's nice. So maybe I do well in that portion.
Yeah.
But traditionally, I'm not a great learner in that sense, and I think it's stupid, actually. I don't like when companies, I mean, I guess for some things it's important, but silly tests like that probably weed out a lot of good pilots, so I don't know. I'm glad that you passed it, but being a bad test taker, I take offense to such testing.
Yeah.
I can't help it. So I'm very familiar, obviously, with air medical here in the United States. What does air medical look like in Germany? What's your schedule? Single pilot, dual pilot, flying at night, not flying at night? Are you doing scene calls? Give me the down and dirty of flying air medical.
Yeah, I mean, what I do is pretty much single pilot EC-135, and in general, the way we do it in Germany is that we have a HEMS TC, which is like a paramedic and also like kind of like a co-pilot. So they're not like trained as pilots as such, but they support us with navigation, with radio communication. They like doing our approaches. They open the door, check for any obstacles. They're like, they're awesome to have around. And then the other big thing that we have, which I think is very different from the States, is that we always take an emergency doctor with us. So we have a crew of 3 people. So it's myself as a pilot, the paramedic, and then the doctor in the back. And our main purpose, I would say, is probably flying the doctor to scene calls, because they, in Germany, the normal paramedics, I think they are very restricted to what they can use with regards to medication. And I think only about like a third of the time we actually take patients in the helicopter with us. The rest of the times we just take care of them. Either the doctor flies back with me, or sometimes they drive back in the ambulance and we just pick them back up. So I think that's very different from the States. Schedule-wise, at my base, we fly sunrise to sunset, but the earliest we start at 7 a.m. So right now it's like 7 a.m. to 9:15 or 9:20 p.m. And we could get a scene call up until that last minute, and then we can fly to a scene, but we have to land before the end of evening civil twilight. Afterwards, we're not allowed to land at a scene call, but we're allowed to land obviously at airports or at our base afterwards.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, there's some bases that do 24 hours, usually with 2 pilots or with something called the pilot in command under supervision. That's kind of like a way that fresh pilots can kind of get trained on the job. So they have lower minimums, so they can start that with about 500 hours. While as a captain, you have to have at least 1,000 to 1,500 realistically. So it's also lower than in the States, I guess.
So your base, the fact that your base closes at say 9:15 right now, that's just your base specific. That doesn't have anything to do with like, is there regulations in Germany that make it harder to fly helicopters at night? Is there different requirements? Did you just draw the straw at a base that you're not having to do that?
Yeah, so if you wanted to do 24-hour operations, we would have to fly with NVGs. And that's a big factor. That's obviously it's very expensive to train the crews on that and to keep them current on this as well. And it's also sometimes has to do something with the with regards to regulations for noise complaints or noise abatement, and sometimes also actually with the contracts, because we have the contracts with the local the state governments, and if our contract doesn't say we have to do 24 hours, then we can't just easily say we do it anyway. That's with regards to rules. I think it's much stricter what they do in Europe and especially in Germany. I think in the States you have a lot more freedom with regards to that because the FAA is a little bit looser on those things.
Yeah, FAA is definitely less restrictive in a lot of areas, good and bad. There's good things about less regulation, and then there's some negatives, obviously. Well, what did the training look like for you? How long was it? How much flight time was it? How much ground was it? How much do they emphasize crew resource management? All those fun things.
This podcast is brought to you by HeliCASTS. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. HeliCASTS handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at HeliCASTS today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HeliCASTS, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
Yeah. So, first in our company, they really want to make sure that we're part of the company and we're not just pilots who show up. So we spent the first 3 months actually at the main campus of the company in Munich. And we got to work in all types of different departments, meeting all the people that support us as flight crews later on, seeing what happens behind the scenes, because there's a giant apparatus behind the scenes that take care of everything from fuel to clothing to like making sure that our helicopters fly and everything. So that was the first bit. And then we did this called ACRM. So it's advanced, or I think aeromedical crew resource management, it's called. And that was probably one of the coolest and most impressive courses that I've taken in my career so far. It's been like a 3-day course that first they go through a lot of scenarios and they kind of talk about like how to do crew resource management in the aircraft. But then we also like learned on like first-hand examples how that actually works, and then doing some like it was like this outdoor like adventure climbing park or something like this, where we actually had to work as a crew to kind of simulate rescuing people. And this whole course, that was insane. It was amazing. I was really glad I got to do that. And then shortly afterwards, I started my time with the type rating. I think we had 2.5 weeks of full-time ground school. I don't even know how many hours it was, going through the entire training manual from Airbus helicopters with a very experienced pilot who kind of taught us obviously the stuff that the EASA requires, but also a lot of things that he learned in his career, like what works well, where you should be careful, what is specific about this helicopter. And so we got to do all the ground school, and then afterwards we did 15 hours of flying. I think 7 of those were in the simulator, so full motion simulator. Which unfortunately on my second simulator flight I had to stop it after about 45 minutes because I got motion sickness. I never had that before. That was kind of tough, but luckily got over that and could finish the rest of my simulator time. Flew a bunch of maneuvers in the 135, which was really cool. And we fly 2 different models. So we fly the P2 and the P2 Plus with autopilot. So you actually got to learn to fly with a little bit more not more complex, but a little bit older model with a P2. And then in the simulator, you actually got to learn how to fly with the autopilot, because I never flown with an autopilot before, and that was really neat. And so that was just the baseline, and then like everything in life, then the real world happens, and you learn so much more. So I was very fortunate. I got to fly with the former station chief of this base here for about 3 months, and kind of first he was flying and I was observing him. So he kind of showed me how you pick landing sites, what to look out for. How to like support your crew, like, so you're not only the pilot, but you're also a lot of times there to help your crew with something. And then one step after the other, then I got to fly myself, and then he kind of gave me feedback on what I could do better. And after about 3 months, and flying at 2 other bases as well, then I got the thumbs up for my original chief pilot, and I got to fly myself, which was pretty exciting.
That's crazy. I mean, that's a very it's a long. I mean, that almost sounds like it's like 12 months just to.
That was about 7, I think. Yeah.
That's crazy. I thought my 1 month at Air Evac sucked. That's a long time. And were you? I don't know really where you live, but did you have to be away from home a lot during that time?
I mean, I moved for the job from the States over here, so I actually didn't really have a home. So I was sometimes staying with my parents. Sometimes I bought a camper van. I stayed in that, traveled around a little bit. I think I went like 3 or 4 times. I went for like a week or so. When I had some breaks, I went over to the States to visit my wife and my dog. And yeah, so it's mostly been living on the road during that first year.
Crazy. And now your wife has since moved. Your dog has moved. You got a dog?
We got a 15-year-old beagle.
15-year-old?
Mm-hmm.
Man, old boy. And he flew all the way over, huh? How'd that go?
Yeah, that was a very big task as well, getting him over here. Not easy, not cheap, but we're glad we brought him.
Did he ride up top with you or down below?
Neither. We actually had to go with like there's a chartered flight company. They're called K9 Jets. They fly like small chartered jets with like, I think it was 12 people on it. And my wife, so we actually had to drive from Portland to New Jersey in a week, and then have to sit her on the private jet, and I got to fly a normal flight, and then pick her up in Frankfurt. But it was not as glamorous as you expect, but was a great way to make sure the dog survives the flight. That's
crazy. That's really crazy. You're a good dog owner. Your dog appreciates that, I'm sure.
I hope you notice that.
So I know that you've been, part of Hillsboro Heli Academy. I think, are you still part of the academy?
Yeah. Been since 2019. I've been kind of taking over I'm not sure what the right term of it is, but it's like the official title is European representative. So I'm kind of like a contact person for potential pilots from Europe. So when they think about coming to Hillsboro, then I can answer all the questions. I do like webinars. We go through like European rotas or some other events, and kind of helps them to have somebody that comes from the same cultural background, because I can relate to them over a lot of things that maybe American couldn't, because we just like culture. There's some differences, and just for example, in Germany, people are not used to paying for education, and like then telling them, oh yeah, you're gonna spend $120,000 on flight training, which in the States obviously is a big deal, but it's not as big of a deal. Like in Germany, the only time you ever spend that much money is if you buy a house. So that's one of the really big things where it kind of helps to guide the people a little bit and make them understand like what they're taking on, pretty much.
Is there student loan options for Europeans, or does it all have to pretty much be self-funded?
Yeah, it's unfortunately there's no great student loan system in Europe for that. There's some companies that like they help you get student loan or get loans from banks. One is actually, they're called Albatross. They're owned by, I think they're owned by Lufthansa. They help people a little bit, but you always have to take care of it yourself. So it's not as easy as in the States. And most of our students, I would say, probably finance their flight training through their parents. Some are lucky enough that they had some savings. One interesting thing is that you can actually deduct the flight training, I think, for up to 7 years after the training, in Germany at least, from your taxes. So that could be interesting for some people, but for some reason, in some cities you can, and in some cities you can't. And I don't understand the logic behind that. But there's at least a potential that you can deduct it from your taxes.
Yeah, interesting. So how much of your time then is taken up talking to these potential prospective students in Europe?
I mean, obviously doing those events, we spend like at European Eurotours at Aero Friedrichshafen, you spend like 3 or 4 or 5 full days, which, yeah, it's like 8 to 10 hours or so. And at the end of the day, you don't have any voice anymore. Outside of that, I don't know, just a couple of hours a day, I'd say. Usually not so much when I'm working, obviously, but when I'm off, I spend sometimes answering emails. I do this like online class with the students every Tuesday that takes about like an hour and a half to 2 hours. Some webinars. It's hard to judge, but it doesn't really feel like work. So it feels more like texting your family or friends or something. So it's that's why I don't really keep track too much of how much time I'm spending on that.
Yeah, it's awesome. Something that you're passionate about, helping, you're ushering the next generation of European pilots. Talk to me a little bit about, obviously Hillsboro Heli Academy is a sponsor of the podcast, so thanks to them for sponsoring. Got a lot of people learning how to fly that listen to the podcast, so I think it's a great relationship that we have with Hillsboro, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited that it's my alma mater. But Hillsboro is doing some pretty cool things, and this is like a non-biased look at it. If you're considering schools, do your research. But specifically, Hillsboro Heli Academy, if you're European, now allows you, I think kind of Phil might have spearheaded this, but allows you to go through and get your EASA certifications at the same time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of put in charge of that by default because I was the only one who had an European license. And Jared asked me to kind of run with that. And we found a great school in Austria that we partnered with. And thanks to them, we can actually get the full European commercial license with the ATPL theory, which in Europe, most of the operators require you to have. So students can pretty much do all the European license in the States, which is pretty awesome. And that's kind of similar to what Bristow had back in the day. But yeah, it's a little bit more focused on self-study. So when I went through Bristow, they had a lot of like classroom, like every second day was 8 hours in a classroom. We focus more on self-study with like online systems that students can kind of, decide themselves a little bit how intensively they're studying. So it's giving them a little bit more freedom and also significantly making it cheaper. Like I think I spent over $20,000 just on the theory, and those students, they obviously spend much less.
Man, that's really neat. Really cool. Is there other flight schools in the United States that are offering that, or is it kind of exclusive right now to Hillsboro?
So I know that Bristow, I mean, they don't exist as a half, and thanks to Brexit, they couldn't do EASA anymore anyway. I don't think on the helicopter side there is anyone else who does EASA. I think on the airplane side there might be a couple, but on the helicopter side, to my knowledge, it's the only school that does EASA, and especially in the with the F1 visa on top of it, that's kind of really unique because the students can not only get the EASA license, but then also build the flight time that they need to fly in Europe. So that's pretty awesome.
It's really a cool deal. You know, all the guys and gals that I went to school with that were European, you know, they do everything, and then some of them will work in the United States, either as CFIs and or even extend. Some people get married and they're able to extend the United States. Some people have other ways of extending. But, you know, I have buddies that are doing now their EASA conversion 12, 15 years later, you know. And to me, that would be awful because it's like you're out of the training world, right? And it's just like, oh, do you have to go back into this? And so I think it's really neat that you can kind of kill two birds with one stone, do your FAA and a EASA. Super cool reason to consider Hillsboro if you're a European guy or gal. Phil, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
I mean, I can give you, I guess you can post my Instagram or otherwise my email address.
Yep, we can do that. If we can post your email address in the body of the summary, and then what's your handle on Instagram?
Yeah, I think it's heli.phil. I have to look that up just to be sure.
we think it's heli.phil.
Yeah.
Let me, you know what? Let me just take all the guesswork out. I'm going to pull up Instagram right now. Yep, there you are. Heli.phil, 1L for Phil.
Uh-huh.
Hey, we came, we saw, we conquered. This wasn't the world's easiest episode. We had some technical difficulties on the first run, so I appreciate you coming back on. And then, of course, we had some interruptions with you doing your air medical, but I think that's cool. This is the Helicopter Podcast, after all. And so the fact that here we are chatting and then beep, you know, you're going on your flight. It all worked, and here we are. We made it.
Yeah.
So, Phil, thank you so much for coming on. I'm excited about getting to know you a little bit more and hearing your story. And I think that your knowledge, your experience will continue to help specifically European students kind of navigate training in the United States, which is obviously an advantageous route to go. So I really appreciate you coming on. What time is it now? How you almost off shift for today?
No, I think I got another hour and a half right now. So
not too bad. You guys got some like comfy couches and lazy boys or what?
Yeah, it's actually really nice. We have like a couch. We have TVs in our rooms. Everyone has their own like nice big room with a good setup. So it's almost, it feels like home, honestly. So it's really nice.
That's awesome. Well, Phil, thanks again for coming on. To our listeners, thank you so much for continuing to listen and support the Helicopter Podcast so we can do cool content like chat with guys like Phil. To our sponsors, absolutely love you all and appreciate the sponsorship. And of course, MHM Publishing and the Vertical HeliCASTS platform. If you haven't checked out the other podcasts on the platform, you're missing out. We got the Vertical MRO, Hangar Z podcast, and the Real Rescue. So a variety of different options, one-stop shop for all helicopter podcasting. You can find it on HeliCASTS.com or wherever you enjoy your podcast. So thank you again for listening, Phil. My man, we did it. Thanks. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
We know you love helicopters. That's why you're here. But are you ready to make it a career? Hillsboro Heli Academy has been making dreams of flying helicopters come true since 1980. Visit us at flyhaa.com and dream big.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical HeliCASTS and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators. This podcast is brought to you by Helicopter. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. Helicopter handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at Helicopter today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HELICOPTER, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.